Be smart. Brush off the online noise.
There isn't much I remember from primary school. I do remember struggling with knitting. It took me half a year to knit a scarf. I remember this only because my mom told me for the rest of her life that I was more patient about knitting than I was about anything else. Go figure. She was wrong too. There's something else I've always had patience for. Science. Now there's a difference between knitting and science. Knitting, for a single-digit-year-old, is not difficult to grasp as a concept, but motorically difficult to do. I had to train and train and train, and at the end I had my scarf. Science, on the other hand, for any adult of choice, may not necessarily be difficult to do, but it's difficult to grasp once you get down to it. So people just leave it alone. Honestly, I don't blame them for that. Scientists suck at telling people what they do. So they are put into imaginary ivory towers where they discuss the greatest questions high above the rest of us. We're like hobbits to these wizards. See, here's the original process of fundamental science. The trick is to ask relevant questions. These have to have an answer. You'd be surprised how many questions don't. The rest should be quite familiar. It's not train, but think, do, until you get an inkling of knowledge. It takes time. It takes patience. In other words, it takes deep interest. Which brings me back to knitting. Are you a single-digit-year-old who wants to learn how to knit? You're probably not, but humor me for a second here, are you? Yes, you are. Learning how to knit then takes time. It takes patience. In other words, it takes deep interest. It's just like being a scientist, but you don't go the route of muscle memory with science. You have to think. You have to be clever. No, you don't. Because everything above is just code for how to automate a way of thinking, not muscle memory, but, well, memory. In this way, you learn to see fallacies, avoid fallacies, and realize that despite all this, you're still a fallible human. So other researchers look at your work, attempt to shred it, and if they don't succeed, move on together with you. You're supposed to do the same thing to and with them. And that's where things become weird to non-scientists. I mean, being expected to destroy someone's work, or at least try to. I've alluded to Lord of the Rings. That's some real Saruman fun stuff right there. Gandalf, Galadriel, Saruman and Elrond meeting and arguing in their ivory towers. Yet, if you look at it with a bit less prejudice, you'll realize something. The actual process is not that difficult to understand. Do, think, discuss. Do, think, do, discuss, do ad nauseam. The conclusions, though, the actual physics coming out of finding those good questions, that is, of course, a different story. Here, I have an example. The coronavirus. That's my example. As of April 2021, we read and hear about vaccines to COVID-19. And we believe what we read because A, we want to have a vaccine. B, that's how science works, right? Let the wise men and women gather in their ivory towers and hold council. Once we see the white smoke above the tower, we know that a solution to our problem is found by Doctors Gandalf and Galadriel and or by Professors Saruman and Elrond. If only it worked that way, well, then we'd all convince ourselves that benevolent dictatorships are the best form of government, but that's a different story for a different day. With respect to corona, though, well, it doesn't work that way. Perhaps some of the medicines even work today, but we know next to nothing about what else they do to our bodies, and that is dangerous in itself. I mean, we've seen the movie. We know Professor Saruman to be wrong. And if he is, then why should we assume that we know so much better? And that's where the simile stops. In science, Professor Saruman comes out of Orthanc when Dr. Gandalf talks to him. He ain't glad, of course, but he comes out and waits for his bad mood to calm down because getting that vaccine tested properly is more important than anything ever. Just ask the guy who found the cure to polio back in the day. So be patient. Get that vaccine yourself. And see, because we've rushed things, but we'll also get this done, as always. And if you feel helpless, like you can't do anything, well, you can inform yourself. Not to know what others take a lifetime to know, but what it means to be an actual expert in any given field. The facts are complex. Science itself isn't. Make the trust you give somebody valuable. More valuable than how to debate someone about whether vaccines work. Read about how facts are obtained properly. Do that, then think of the process of fundamental science again. Then stand in front of a mirror, look at yourself and repeat after me. I don't have to be that clever. I am but a hobbit, but I would still be able to do this too, if I had or if I took the time to work with it.